Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to talk about active voice and passive voice. I want to differentiate between active and passive voice sentences. I would like to make active and passive voice sentences video in two parts. In first part of my video, I will be talking about the basic information about active voice and passive voice, what is the difference between them, and how to make use of active or passive voice sentences in your spoken and written discourse or communication. In the second part of my active and passive voice video, I will be giving you some advanced information. Okay, so in the very first video, I'll explain active and passive voice and the structure of active and passive voice sentences. Remember, voice here does not mean sound. Voice is the form of a verb that it takes to indicate whether the subject of the verb performs the action or receives the action. In active voice, we know that the subject of the sentence, it performs the action. In passive voice, the subject of the sentence receives the action. So again, voice here does not mean sound. Voice here means whether the verb, the subject of the sentence, it is performing the action, or the subject of the sentence, it is receiving the action. There are two types of voice in English: active voice and passive voice. Active voice indicates that the subject of the verb is acting, is performing the action. Because the subject does or acts upon the verb, in such sentences, the sentences are said to be in the active voice. These examples show that the subject is doing the verb's action. The dog jumped onto the boy. So dog is the subject and it is doing the jumping. Onto the boy, boy is the object. So boy here is receiving the action. So the dog is the subject, jumped is the verb, and the boy is the object. And this sentence is in past simple tense because second form of the verb is telling us that this is the past simple tense. Amna will give a book report to the class. So Amna is the subject and she is going to give the book report. So book report is another object, and give here is a verb. The computer ate my paper. So the computer is the subject, is doing the eating, at is verb, and my paper is object. In passive voice, in a passive voice sentence, the subject and object flip-flop. They change their positions. For example, in active voice, the subject, it becomes the object of the passive voice, and the object of the passive voice, it becomes the subject of the active voice. Dear students, you should remember that we are not supposed to do the translation when we are speaking English or when we are writing English. So it is not that all the time we are changing the sentences from active to passive voice or passive to active voice. This is not humanly possible. Rather, our communication, our spoken discourse, our written discourse or written communication, it is a mixture of active and passive voice sentences. And good writing should have both kinds of voices, both kind of sentences in them. And why I have told you about this? Because yes, I know at metric level or FA or FSC level, you are supposed to change the voice of the sentences. So you are given these exercises or you are given such type of questions in the paper. But you should remember that you should do the exercises in such a way that it is said that practice makes a man perfect. So if you carry out a lot of practice in this regard, so you will be able to master this point. and then you will be able to speak the sentences fluently or write the sentences fluently, and you are not supposed to change the active into passive or passive into active. So you make decisions, conscious decisions, that how or where to use active voice and how or where to use passive voice. The subject becomes the passive recipient of the action in passive voice sentence. Because the subject is being acted upon or is passive, such sentences are said to be in the passive voice. These examples show the subject being acted upon by the verb. The boy was jumped on by the dog. So boy here is the subject. Usually, in fact, boy was the object in active voice. When we said the dog jumped onto the boy. But here the dog jumped onto the boy. But here the boy has become the subject because we have changed its position from object to the subject. Was being jumped on. This is the verb. Okay, was jumped, and the dog, by the dog. So this is the object here, which was basically the subject in the active voice. And another thing that you should remember, as I have just told you, that our spoken and written communication, it is a combination of active and passive voice sentences. So by phrase is not important in passive voice, because something which is important to the speaker, something which is important to the writer, he or she brings it in the beginning of the sentence. So if dog is important to me, I will write dog in the beginning. If the boy is important to me, I will write boy in the beginning. A book report will be given by Christy or Amna to the class. A book report now is the subject, will be given because it was in future simple tense. Future simple passive is made, will be given by Christy or Amna to the class. So report is the subject here, which was basically the object in active voice. Will be given verb. My paper was eaten by the computer. Paper is the subject and was being eaten is the verb here. Now, what are the reasons and how to use active voice or where to use active voice? Most writers or speakers prefer to use active voice because it is more direct. For example, the waiter dropped the tray of food. Who is doing the action? The waiter. So waiter is important to us. Waiter is important to me. That is why I am bringing the waiter at the place of the subject. I am foregrounding the waiter. I am bringing the waiter in the beginning of the sentence. The waiter dropped the tray of food. So passive voice is the tray of food was dropped by the waiter. Now passive voice is quite lengthy. Now we can see that it is not more direct as compared to the active voice. So when we want to be direct, when we want to be brief and concise, we use active voice sentences. And when we want to nominate that who has done this thing, we use active voice sentences. The active voice is less awkward and clearly states the relationship between subject and action. Yes. Compare. Your request for funding has been denied by the review committee. So it's a long sentence. Okay, it looks awkward. Your request for funding has been denied by the review committee. Review committee is so important. They have got the power to reject your request for funding. So why don't you bring it in the beginning of this sentence? So active voice is more appropriate here. The review committee denied your request for funding. The active voice sentence pattern propels the reader forward through your writing, thus avoiding weak prose. So in passive voice, the prose will be quite weak. In active voice, the prose will be quite strong. Now, when to use passive voice? In general, the passive voice is less direct, less forceful, and less concise than the active voice. So active voice is more direct, more forceful, and more concise. On the other hand, passive voice is less direct, less forceful, and less concise. Use the passive voice in the following situations. Use passive voice when you do not know or do not want to reveal the performer of the action. Number one, you do not know who did it. Number two, you do not want to tell the audience, you do not want to tell the reader that who has done this action. Or we can say the doer of the action is not important to you. You here means the speaker of discourse, the speaker of the sentences, the person who is writing or producing those sentences. If he or she feels that the doer of the action is not important, then you should go for passive voice. Or if it is not known to you, use passive voice when you want to emphasize the receiver of an action. If you want to emphasize the receiver of the action, then you should go for passive voice. Awkward passive voice. My bicycle was repainted by John. My bicycle was repainted by Ali. So, deliberate passive. My bicycle was repainted. Now, this looks quite good because for you, your bicycle is more important. And by John or by Ali is not important to you. Otherwise, you could have used the active voice. So, since you are using the passive voice, by phrase is not important. Keep this thing in your mind. But our teachers will ask you time and again to use by phrase in the passive voice. Yes, we can say when you are converting it from active to passive, by phrase you can write. But remember, by phrase is not important. If you can delete it from the sentence, your sentence is perfectly all right and you should not be worried about it. My bicycle was repainted. The performer is not mentioned and the emphasis is on the bicycle because bicycle is more important to me. Now we should know that what are the forms of passive voice. The passive voice requires a double verb and will always consist of a form of the verb to be and the past participle, third form of the verb, which usually ends with en, ed, or t. Active voice. Ali baked the bread or John baked the bread. Passive voice. The bread was baked by John or Ali. So was is a form of the verb be. So in passive voice, the verb be, it has got different forms. Writers should be familiar with the forms of the verb to be, often called linking verb, so that they can easily identify the passive voice in their work. So passive voice, the form of the verb be is, am, are in present tense, was, were in past tense, and be, being, or being in continuous or perfect sentences. So is, am, are simple, was, were past simple, continuous is, am, are plus being, was, were plus being, or perfect has been, have been, or had been. So you can have a look at it. Is kicked, was kicked, is being kicked, has been kicked, was being kicked, had been kicked, is going to be kicked, will be kicked, can be kicked, or should be kicked. Often passive voice sentences will contain a by phrase indicating who or what performed the action. If you want to tell in the passive voice that who did the action, by phrase you can use. Otherwise, there is no need of by phrase. You can remove it. I was born, you were born, Qaid-e-Azam was born. We don't say Qaid-e-Azam was born by his mother because it is understood that our mothers give birth to us. So usually this sentence is written in passive voice. So there is no need to say by his mother or by her mother. Passive sentences can be easily transformed into active sentences when the object of the preposition by is moved to the subject position in the sentence. Form of the passive voice verbs. The cookies were eaten by the children. So by the children, children is the subject basically. So we can bring it in the first position, the children ate the cookies because that was in passive voice, past simple tense. Were eaten changed into ate. The children ate the cookies. The tunnels are dug by the gophers. The gophers dug the tunnels. So this is for you that if you want to do some practice, have a look at these sentences. But now I would like to give you the chart of active and passive voice sentences. Please have a look at this chart. Simple present and simple past. Active voice, simple present. The movie fascinates me. First form of the verb is telling that this is present simple and active voice. And me, so me will come in the place of subject. I am fascinated by the movie. The movie bores Jack. Jack is bored by the movie. The movie surprises them. They are surprised by the movie. The movie bored me, past simple tense. Here we will be using was verb plus third form of the verb. I was bored by the movie. The movie fascinated Jack. Jack was fascinated by the movie. The movie surprised them. They were surprised by the movie. Now have a look at it. Present continuous and past continuous. I am helping Shannon. I am helping. So is MR plus being plus third form of the verb. Shannon is being helped by me. June is helping Sue and Ling. Sue and Ling are being helped by June. Amna is helping me. I am being helped by Amna. Negative will be I am not being helped by Amna. Interrogative will be am I being helped by Amna? I was cleaning the bathroom. The bathroom was being cleaned by me. Negative will be the bathroom was not cleaned by me. Was the bathroom cleaned by me? They were cleaning the bedroom. The bedroom was being cleaned by them. The bedroom was not being cleaned by them. Was the bedroom being cleaned by them? Susan was cleaning the kitchen. The kitchen was being cleaned by Susan. You were beating them. They were being bitten by you. They were being beaten by you. Beaten. They were being beaten by you. They were not being beaten by you. Were they being beaten by you? Perfect tenses. I have mailed the gift. So have plus third form, active voice. Have been plus third form, passive voice. The gift has been mailed by me. Jack has mailed the gifts. The gifts have been mailed by Jack. The gifts have not been mailed by Jack. Have the gifts been mailed by Jack? Past perfect. Stephen had directed the movie. The movie had been directed by Stephen. The movie had not been directed by Stephen. Had the movie been directed by Stephen? Future perfect. John will have finished the project next month. The project will have been finished by next month. They will have finished the projects before then. The projects will have been finished before then. And future simple and future continuous with going to. I will mail the gift. The gift will be mailed by me. Jack will mail the gifts. The gifts will be mailed by Jack. I am going to make the cake. The cake is going to be made by me. She is going to make 2 cakes. 2 cakes are going to be made by she. So this is how, dear students, we can convert active voice sentences into passive or from passive again into the active voice sentences. As usual, I have talked about what is the difference between active and passive voice sentences. Voice does not mean sound. Voice here means whether the subject of the sentence is performing the action or receiving the action. If the subject is performing the action, the sentence is in active voice. If the subject is receiving the action, the sentence is in passive voice. And usually passive voice is used in scientific writing, and when you want to be less direct, and when you want to sound awkward, and when you want to want to be very forceful, when you want to be very direct, we use active voice sentences. And in the end, I have discussed the chart of active and passive voice sentences and the kinds of verbs that we usually use in active and passive voice sentences. Thank you very much.